So this is my action research visual poster presentation. My name is Georgette. So my question was, how can I create a balance between strong penmanship and technology within the class? So, statement of my research problem. My research topics deals with the pros and cons to the increasing use of technology within the classroom and the effect this has caused on penmanship skills. In addition, because of my strong feelings towards writing and cursive skills, the topics of great importance to me. There is no way to completely eliminate technology within the classroom, but there must be a way to integrate writing skills in a fun and creative way. Maybe reintegration can be, through pen pals, handwritten letters instead of online email. So this is important because students are not only going to be using their handwriting skills, but they're going to be engaged because there's someone that's going to be waiting for a letter, and then they're going to be waiting for a letter back. And in addition to that, you can kind of cross-curricular this to social studies and compare backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses in different countries and different places, and students can research about whatever country that they're sending the letters to and kind of find more information about those students, which is super important to be able to discuss different countries, not just your own one you live in. So my research questions. Are fine motor skills being affected with more time behind a screen instead of pen and paper? How can you create a classroom that is a part of a technological era we are a part of, but still teach core literacy skills through handwriting? And how is student spelling being affected from no longer writing but relying on technology? So obviously we know students are sitting behind iPads and computers and tablets and Chromebooks and all the other sorts of technology. I probably can't even name them all. But we need to really figure out how to way to balance the technology and the quote-unquote old school ways of learning. You know, there needs to be a balance in order for students to really gain strong understanding of everything they're doing. So the definitions are fine motor skills are small movements that occur in wrists, hands, feet, and toes. Literacy is the ability to read and write. Penmanship is the art or skill of writing by hand. An observation, the action or process of observing something or someone carefully in order to gain information. Anecdotal notes are used to record specific observations of individual students' behavior, skills, and attitudes as they relate to the outcomes of the program of studies. So this just says in the next 3 slides, we're going to go into articles regarding penmanship, cursive skills, pros and cons. So the first one, typing or writing. So the article discusses very important topics within handwriting and typing. I'm just kind of skim over this because I'm going to talk about it some more. So you're able to, the article gives some strong ideas. So it states that in a world where everyone records all ideas into the computer, phone, or any piece of technology, old-fashioned skills like handwriting are not being used. In addition, through technology may be an easier way to record information. Research shows that handwriting increases brain activity, helps with fine motor skills, and predicts a child's academic success. This article is interesting, as it does not give a conclusion one way or another, but rather states that technology and handwriting can work together within the classroom. So I was just suggesting at the bottom of this, the article didn't state the app Notability, but I just kind of added on to that. I use the app Notability, which is an amazing app. You can highlight, type, you can change whatever you're writing into actual text as if you were typing off of something, which is amazing. Obviously, it would be hard for some students if their penmanship isn't the greatest because the app necessarily wouldn't be able to convert their writing into text. But there are benefits and negatives to any piece of technology you're using, so you kind of just have to test them out and see what works within your own classroom. And again, to the positives, so increasing brain activity, fine motor skills, and predicting a child's future. That's really strong information in what the research shows. But then again, on the other sides of things, you still need to find a way to balance the two within the classroom. The comparative study. The article does not discuss handwriting and typing in regards to elementary level students, but rather university students, but still gives insight into the benefits and negatives towards both methods of note-taking. Research within the article states that students who take notes on computer are successful with writing sentences, recognizing words, and reproducing the alphabet, whereas students that wrote out their notes were able to perform better on free recall tasks. Handwritten notes, although taken longer, help with memory retention. With this article giving concrete advantages and disadvantages to both methods of note-taking, it raises another question of what positives do you as a student rather have? be it written sentences, recognizing words, and reproducing the alphabet, or performing better on free recall tasks. So both as a teacher and as a student, you have to find the best way to find a balance between the two. What are you looking for? Do you want students to be able to write sentences better, recognize words, reproduce the alphabet, perform better on recall tasks? There's benefits to both of them. You just have to figure out what works best in your classroom. Maybe it's some subjects are computer typing, whereas others you stick mainly to handwriting. As a teacher, you have to find the balance between the two and figure out what works best with your classroom. And again, this may change based off of the age level you have, the students you have in your class, and the needs of them. Obviously, if you have some students on IEPs, some students with disabilities, you're going to have to kind of rework everything you're doing because the same method you use for one year may change to the other. The third article, The Impact of Digital Tools on Student Writing and How Writing is Taught in Schools. The article states many positives and negatives in regards to technology in schools. The positives include the fact that students are able to share their writing pieces to a variety of people, wider audience. Technology encourages collaboration, and they encourage creativity and personal expression. The negatives include informal writing, student thinking that technology is a toy, and may write fast and be careless. It's interesting to note that when teachers were asked their opinion on technology, 50% stated it made teaching easier, 18% said more difficult, and 31% said nothing changed. Although these stats were given, more information into the socioeconomic status, the needs of the classroom weren't given. So it's interesting to say maybe the 50% that stated teaching was easier because they had a more willing classroom, an easier classroom to integrate, whereas the rest could have been from another area. So that piece of information wasn't given, but therefore we can't really conclude on what the article was saying. The summary. The 3 articles I read for the literature annotated biography gave me some more insight into the advantages and disadvantages of handwriting versus typing, or use of technology for writing within the classroom. Of course, students that are diagnosed with a disability or are struggling with fine motor skills should have the technology available in order to make a classroom a more fair and equal environment. Side note on this, grade 3 class that I had one student who at a very early age, I cannot remember what he was diagnosed with, but it did affect his fine motor skills. And that was a diagnosis at the age of 2 or 3, and flash forward to grade 3 now. His fine motor skills are still being affected. It's very hard to read his writing, and he therefore becomes very discouraged. We did give him an iPad and a Chromebook and a laptop to use at his choice whenever he felt the need to, and he was able to express his opinions freely, more openly, and get more work done in a timely fashion. So again, like I said, you have to find a balance between what you're doing, who you're giving the opportunity to. And again, with an inclusive classroom, if that's the kind of school you're doing or the route you're taking, which is really important, you have to figure out how you're going to give these pieces of technology to students who truly need them, but still find a balance to giving the technology to the other students who may not necessarily need them. But in an inclusive classroom, everyone still has to find that balance and figure out how to give each student what they need / want. Just gonna skip over this. Right, for the digital era, school boards such as the Durham region are giving full carts of Chromebooks to each class, grade 6 and up, making handouts and worksheets irrelevant and unnecessary. When doing so, obviously the environment is being considered, and school boards are saving a bunch of money on the paper. Obviously they're spending money in the beginning giving out all of these Chromebooks, but what's being affected? What are we losing as teachers? What are the students losing when they are doing their handouts, doing their worksheets online opposed to on a piece of paper? When students take this work home, can they change it? Are their parents helping them out with it? So grading then also becomes a little skewed, and teachers need to take that into consideration as well. So I believe to have a balance between typical writing subjects like the language arts need to be more traditional, but then other subjects can be solely technology based in order to meet the students' needs and their wants, limit paper use, increase productivity in some cases, and stick within the digital era. So with the feedback from my partner, I did decide to remove a question and rephrase the others in order to make them less broad. As I started this assignment, I thought I had created very well-rounded questions, but with feedback, I was able to realize that they were maybe a little broad and difficult to measure within a short period of time and within my own classroom. So having partners for this assignment gives everyone another point of view or ideas in order to become more successful. So the data sources I chose were anecdotal, interviews, and records. I believe these sources will give me all the information I need. Although interviews are less probable, I believe as a teacher it is important to discuss with students their opinions, likes, and dislikes. In doing so, I would still have to be open-minded to the fact that some students in our one-to-one interviews may express that they prefer typing simply because it's easier or they like it better. Other than keeping that in mind, the sources I have chosen will work fluidly within any classroom for me, as I already in the habit of writing anecdotal notes and having interviews with students. Any teacher choosing sources should think about how seamlessly they can integrate these sources while still maintaining well laid out plans, marking, etc. Triangulation, validity, and reliability. The three sources I chose, like I said previously, were interview, anecdotal, and record. These three sources will show triangulation because they are not simply ways of collecting data. The data sources are valid because they each work together to answer the same question and allow for the same information to be given or answered by a multitude of means. Anecdotal are important because they are simply based off of observation, while interview are based off of conversation. Lastly, record are helpful pieces of assessment at the end of projects, in addition to previous grades or records from previous years. The sources offer reliability because if the same conclusion is found through all three sources, then it would prove to be consistent. As all three data sources are so different, if the findings are the same, then it can be seen as believable and reliable. So again, if a teacher is deciding to use handwriting in one year, and all the grades from the previous year were also handwriting and they stay consistent, then obviously you can see how that's benefiting or negative, what the advantages or disadvantages for that student. Whereas if you choose to do a technology-based classroom in your year and the previous year's handwriting and grades go up, you can obviously see that there is a change there and obviously there's benefits for that student. So the participants would be myself, the teacher, students, and parents. Obviously, they need to be kept in the loop so they know what's happening. If their student does come home and say, hey, I had an interview with my teacher today, parents need to know what's happening. So another way to do that is to use apps such as Remind, just to take quick pictures so parents know what's happening within the classroom. In a dream world, there would be two classes involved, one class that handwrites, another that uses technology to type. Then, after a term or two or a full school year, grades can be compared, anecdotal notes examined, and interviews with students concluded. And the setting will be at school. There won't be too many ethical issues here. Everything will be kept at school. Participants' names will not be used. Interviews, all that information will be kept confidential and kept within the classroom and not leave school property. Anecdotal notes will be weekly and they'll be in a binder with a separate page for each student. Interviews will be conducted monthly for each student, one interview a day, for example, student A October 1st, student B October 2nd, and so on. Records will be looked at when the school year starts to see how students' grades were, how they are, and how they will be. Then they will be compared to how they change throughout the year. Interviews are a quick way to gauge students' understanding and see their point of view. I will observe students while working both with technology and writing. I will be looking for their ability to do independent work, take initiative, and self-regulate. Again, those are learning skills and work habits, so I'm basically getting 2 for 1 here. Looking at their learning skills and work habits, getting grades for those, and seeing how they can incorporate those learning skills into their ability to use technology and write. The data source for records will be students' marks. What's important for this data analysis is the language arts activities I will be giving. Students will be using both typing and handwriting to complete units such as persuasive, narrative, and procedural. This will allow me to compare students' marks from typing versus handwriting. So right here I just have some feedback from the instructor and my partner. And below are the changes I made. So prior to feedback, records and artifacts were the third data source. I decided to change records and artifacts to just records. I added a few more definitions to the page. I reworded some questions that were a little too broad. I arranged them down in order to figure out how I would be able to find the information within a classroom setting. I included examples of questions I would ask as well, just to give someone some more insight. So by doing this Action Research project, I was able to delve deeper into my opinions on technology and see other points of view. Due to this Action Research poster presentation, I was forced to look into articles and read the advantages and disadvantages to both ways of writing within the classroom. So this was a great opportunity to be able to take advantage of this project and use my own personal opinions